Good evening, Brendan.
I always love your hesitancy when it comes to the salutation on Bogotá Nights, but because you're always thinking of our global audience, those just waking up in the Pacific Islands or in New Zealand or Australia or whatever to tune in and to watch us here on Bogotá Nights. Well, you come to me as the sound of raindrops beat down. I've tried to move my computer to another area where hopefully I can pick up a better signal than I have been getting the last few weeks. But how's your week been anyway, Ollie?
It's been good, Brendan, I've got to be honest. I think things have... it's been a pretty good week. It's been pretty quiet, but it's been pretty good.
Good. And pretty appropriately, I think, for the theme that we have for tonight, so our big topic in the second half. Today, when I was wandering around Verbanal in the late afternoon, I came across a taxi in distress. And this has almost become a monthly affair where I end up helping said taxi drivers to pushing them, their broken down taxi, to the nearest garage or whatever to be fixed. And why I think that's appropriate is because it reminds me of the early 90s back home in the rural west of Ireland, where we had a Fiat Regatta that where we spent more time pushing it than it actually being propelled by the motor in it. It tended to be broken down, or the engine in it. It was broken down more time than it actually worked. So quite appropriate for tonight's theme, Ollie. So will we crack on and get our teeth into things?
Let's
do it. Well, guys, remember this is Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show. And for some of us of a certain vintage and from certain high-income countries, or what are high-income countries today anyway, the way of life in Bogotá in many ways resembles that of the fun-filled 1990s. What we're getting at here is that, for example, cash still lords it over card for most transactions. There's still life in the high street, and health and safety regulations haven't yet become an enormous headache. Do you agree? Does life in Bogotá and Colombia in general today remind you of what you might call less complicated times in your country of origin? Or do you find it frustratingly behind the times? On the contrary, are there areas where you think it's way more advanced than many high-income nations? As ever, it's your comments and live interaction that fuel us here, so send us in your messages right now and they'll magically appear on screen. If you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet, the handle being at Bogotá Post with the hashtag Bogotá Nights. We always like to get your messages whenever they come our way. And our turning our backs to the future adventure is to come, but it's our take on the week's main news first. And Ollie, I'm going to ask you a direct question to start with, and then we can kind of go into the backstory. But has Claudia López, has our beloved mayor, Claudia López, been attending the Maria Fernanda Cabal School of Politics of late?
So, I mean, I can see where you're coming from when you say that, Brendan. Certainly, she does seem to have taken a very bizarre turn towards kind of this almost Nigel Farage or Donald Trump-like anti-immigrant rhetoric. And it's surprising. It's not something you expect. You know, she came into office with a kind of progressive reputation. So yeah, it's very disappointing, I think.
Well, so let's get into the backstory. What's the latest this week, or really in the last 24 hours? She called for, I guess, what we could call something similar to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the United States, known as ICE, or the Borders Control in the UK, but specifically, I think, for Bogotá. What exactly did she look for, and is she still looking for?
Well, she wants, as you say, like what she's describing as she wants a commando force. That's the words she used. Obviously, you know, very militaristic sounding. She wants a commando force made of police and immigration officials to go and hunt down migrants who are causing crime. And to be honest, Brendan, it just seems like this idea is flawed as a very concept. You know, her justification for this seems to be that she says there's a big problem because everybody knows who Colombians are because they've got their ID, They've got their fingerprints on record, blah, blah, blah. But we don't know who any of these foreigners are. They could just be anybody. Now, I don't know about you, Brendan, but I've always been under the impression that tourists and all foreigners need to carry around their IDs also. I mean, the only real difference between a cédula ciudadania and a cédula de extranjería, the only real difference is our height is not listed, and Colombians' heights are listed. And obviously, and our nationality is listed, but theirs isn't for obvious reasons. Apart from that, there doesn't seem to be any real difference between them. They both have they both have photographs, they both have fingerprints, they're both linked onto central databases, etc. Now, if what Claudia is saying is that there's a problem of illegal migrants, okay, well, that's fine. But surely once people are picked up and don't have the relevant papers on them, they simply go into processing, whether that's to be deported or whether that's through a migrant paper scheme. So it just seems to me like that there shouldn't be a need for this.
Yeah, well, here as a standard tourist from Europe or North America or whatever, then you won't have a cédula, but you won't be carrying around your passport. But unlikely there may be a copy of it, but you probably won't have an ID on you if you are stopped by the police. But as you said, if the police insist, will bring us back to your hotel or your place of residence, blah blah blah. But this touches back on a recurring theme on Bogotá Nights, Ollie, and I know it's one you like to bang the drum on. You have the authorities already in place. Do your job. There is Migración Colombia, they have their own officials, and the police themselves stop and search people on the streets and have the power to do so. Why on earth create another body? It does seem rather ridiculous. Just the people who you have there to do that job right now, just do their job.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you feel like you need to spend more money, hire more of those people, or simply pay them better so that they do their jobs.
Yeah, but she's not. I thought I saw the headline today. I thought, she's retracted her comments. Like she's flip-flopped on so many things since she came into office.
Of course.
She's actually sticking to her guns on this particular one. She says how she's disappointed that it's being kicked to touch straight away. The director of Migración, Juan Francisco Palacios, he had a meeting with Duque today and had a press conference afterwards. So basically, he kind of reinforced what I said there. They have their officers, they have police here, and deportations and expulsions are not the way they're going in this in terms of their due process, etc., etc. But Claudia López is kind of going, no, this isn't the way. Is she playing to a particular gallery, though, that people will kind of go, yeah, good on you, Claudia. Keep your foot on this one.
That seems to be the only reason for it, Brendan, because she, like you said, she is doggedly sticking to this. She's saying that she is disappointed. She's saying they've rejected me. I want to bring this in, but I'm being blocked. And it seems to me very dangerous, Brendan, because I actually find it quite admirable that so far at this point in the, both in the protests and also actually in the election cycle, we haven't seen anti-migrant feeling being stoked up too much, in a way that we've both seen in our home countries, and of course in countries such as Australia, the United States, and various other countries. There's been a lot of anti-migrant rhetoric being used. Now that's been absent in Colombia in general, and I think, to be honest, that the integration of Venezuelan migrants has been better than it certainly could have been, while not perfect. So it's a bit sad to see a politician, and let's not forget, an important high-ranking politician. We're talking about, really the second most influential politician in the country. It's sad to see her doing this.
Now, to play the devil's advocate a little bit here, Ollie, there was a report in El Tiempo last week. They had figures from police and Fiscalía, I think, where it had it about just over 3% anyway of those arrested for crimes here were Venezuelan. So people might say, "Ooh, that's probably a little bit higher than their actual numbers in the country." So are they actually causing more crimes? Now, statistics can be used and thrown about in many ways, and justified and not justified or whatever. But would you give any sort of leeway there on that kind of go, oh, okay, maybe there are more of them involved in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see where people would think that, and it does, I think it's one of those interesting ways that statistics can be bent a little. Let's not forget that when we're talking about often very poor migrants, it's no surprise that a higher number of them drift into crime. If we furthermore look at how they're often systematically blocked from applying for jobs, they find it very hard to rent apartments, things like that. If we put in, again, no surprise that they'll end up turning to crime perhaps in greater numbers. And that's before we get onto things like, the police specifically targeting them, people in the neighborhood maybe calling, maybe calling them in and stuff like that. So there might be a little bit more to those figures. Certainly, as we've pointed out many times on this show before, Colombia was not a peaceful paradise before the Venezuelan migrants arrived.
It was more like 1980s New York. If we're using the 1990s comparison for right now, then it was maybe 1980s New York 10 years ago or something. And by the way, guys, do send us your comments on this. Do you agree with Claudia Lopez? Do you think a new special kind of commando force should be set up, established to track migrants here, specifically Venezuelan ones, really, from what Claudia Lopez was saying? I don't think they'll be tracking Ollie Pritchard or myself.
Yeah. Sorry, in case that hasn't been obvious, let's also be very clear about this. When she says a migrant tracking force, she's not going to be hunting down, overstaying Germans and Australians that might be doing a bit of bar work to top up a tourist visa. No, that's absolutely not what's at stake here. This is very much targeted. Let's be clear. When they say extranjeros, what they mean is Venezuelans.
Yeah, okay, your comments very much welcome, guys. We do like to get them and read them out here, and of course they will appear on screen. Anyway, Ollie, on to kind of more positive news. We're rolling in it in Colombia right now. The money's just rolling in. Great times. The latest figures that the first semester of this year was performed better than the first semester of 2019, so pre the pandemic, when all, I guess, the forecast, the doom and gloom, the credit ratings fiasco of sorts, it's all been kind of pointing in a negative direction. And of course, we have the social unrest. But in terms of money, the headline figures anyway, things are looking very rosy indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm assuming that that's despite Duque rather than because of Duque. But also, credit where it's due. He's managed not to burk things up, at least. Which is a low bar, but nonetheless, it is a bar. But yeah, absolutely. I think we've said before, Brendan, that we've both suspected that Colombia is going to weather the storm of COVID and the pandemic a little bit better maybe than some of the more developed countries. And the proof of the pudding seems to be coming out now. Now, there are questions and there are sort of caveats to this. It's all very nice that GDP is going up, but what does that mean in terms of average wages? What does it mean in terms of disposable income? All that sort of thing. It's not much good if simply a lot of rich shareholders are getting richer. And also, it's worth pointing out, Brendan, that what we really don't know, and I haven't been able to pick up any figures on this. If anybody's watching and they do know any reliable-ish figures on this or estimates, but I'd be really interested to know how the black and grey economies are faring under COVID.
Yeah. Well, that would be interesting to know. I guess it's very hard to get exact figures on that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, in any time. But like in many ways, these healthy figures, and as you said, we talked about this before anyway, that Colombia might come out of this stronger than many other countries in the region because it's practiced throughout its history. Financial prudence, really. That's kind of in Colombia's way. Conservative in many ways, and also when it comes to spending. I mean, I make the little joke. We're talking about Venezuelans here or whatever, but they always tend, when they get talking to me as another foreigner, and if I show signs of my kind of innate tacañerness, if I can say that, but they kind of go, you've become Colombian. They always talk about, the Colombian is reluctant to spend or whatever. Okay, that's not spending on one side. Of course, what these figures are showing that, the economy's roaring anyway. And in that environment, people, I guess, will be more comfortable to go out and resume normal economic life that we had before the pandemic, as much as we are permitted. That would be the hope.
Well, you say will, but actually I think that's already happening. I mean, certainly there's plenty of activity. Look, there are closed shops, absolutely. But to be honest, in Bogotá, it's not unusual for shops to close and regenerate and things like that. Going back to the black economy, I'm really not joking when I say that. It's a lot bigger, of course, here than it is in many other countries. And it is interesting that we've seen a number of high-profile drug busts in the past year or so. And it's interesting that there's this sort of amount of cocaine that seems to be, or cocaine paste, that seems to be being picked up by the authorities. Now, either they're getting a lot more efficient, which seems unlikely, or what seems more likely is simply that there's still quite a lot of coca paste and cocaine leaving Colombia. And that seems to indicate that certainly those parts of the economy are still trucking along as normal.
Well, I don't international figures back that up in terms of the amount of cocaine.
I believe so, yeah. Mm-hmm. Which wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, if most of it is spreading towards the US, where there's a lot of people receiving stimulus checks in the US economy, and I can absolutely see that would be some of that money would find its way into recreational drug use.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a case of that. Like if the official economy is motoring along, a rising tide lifts all boats, and everybody's kind of yeah. Of
course, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my take on it. Anyway, Ollie, I'm not sure if you joined the GoFundMe campaign to help pay for the costs of the funeral of Carlos Ardila Lule, the billionaire who passed away. Not that I'm laughing at his death, but there surely wasn't a GoFundMe campaign anyway for his funeral. But you have an issue on this, not that kind of linking it into the economy though, and taxes and all this kind of stuff. Apparently, he died worth $1.8 billion, so not a poor man whatsoever. And if people don't know who it is, this big
Postobon.
Postobon, media mogul as well, behind RSN, also behind Atlético Nacional. I do have a point to make on Postobon in a second, but just to get to your inheritance tax point, you think Colombia really needs to come down a little bit heavier on that anyway, and maybe there should be a cap on what you can pass on to your offspring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about, when we talk about problems in Colombia, one of the ones we often talk about is a lack of social mobility and the speed at which people are blocked from moving between class markers. And look, the problem we've got really here is that if you allow somebody to pass on an enormous amount of wealth, then you're ossifying. We look at these big famous families, the Lule Ardilas, we look at the Gerases, the Santoses, Ariases, all of these kind of big families in Colombia. The reason that they've been rich, for couple of centuries is quite simply because they've always been able to pass down that power and that influence. And you can't do much about the influence, but you could at least take away some of the money. You could say, I mean, even to be generous, you could say, okay, well, let's call it, a billion or even 10 billion Colombian pesos, or 10 mil millones. That's more than enough to pass on to your family. And look, they'll probably say, oh, yes, but, he's worked hard. And I say, well, they probably inherited wealth in the first place anyway. But also, yeah, okay, if somebody has worked hard, let's say it's a footballer who's come from a poor background and is passing on some money to their children, well, why shouldn't their children also have to work hard, like everybody else's children, to get into a similar position?
Well, just on Luli himself, before the family write-in giving out, he did actually go to the Universidad Nacional in Medellin, so he did go to the public university, but he seemed to marry well. That's what got him on the rung of the ladder. Yeah, it's all about marrying well. I'm still trying to find the right woman to marry in that regard to set me up. It's getting a bit late. But I wanted to mention something about it, though. In this day where we're all concerned about how many lives we can save every living second that we're moving about the place, let's call a spade here. His empire surely is responsible for, if not the death, but very bad health practices of millions of Colombians, most of them drinking too many gaseosas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, and worrying sort of influence over media, as you noted. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's healthy for one person to have this amount of influence and control in a country, and I certainly don't think it should be kept. Again, we've talked before about the idea of there being clans. This is ridiculous in 2021, and I speak fully with the hypocrisy of coming from a nation, one of the reasons I don't live there, that has a royal family. You don't have that in Colombia. Why try to create it? Seems weird to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess they have it de facto in many ways, a few of them in different regions. Anyway, we'll move slightly north into the Caribbean, and, well, Haiti just can't seem to catch a break right now. Devastating earthquake there at the weekend. But our story on the Colombian mercenaries, a little bit more news on this. It's kind of we've been drip-fed information and we find out more, but they've now apparently Ollie admitted, their role and what they knew. It wasn't a case of, we didn't exactly know we were going there to assassinate the president, blah, blah, blah. Now it's more a case of, okay, we knew what we were doing.
Yeah, we were told to kill everybody, including the pets. But then it all gets a bit more complicated because there appears to be there's claims that there's a letter sent to one of the wives in which coded language intimates that torture may have been used to extract information from these soldiers. So there could yet be another twist. I think reading between the lines, Brendan, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if the Haitian police used torture. That wouldn't seem unusual in any way at all. The fact that they have used torture, and it's not a reliable way of getting information, but it doesn't mean that those soldiers were innocently going out to protect the president. So, God only knows.
Well, I saw as well there just earlier on Blue Radio that Colombia is looking to send out to the Colombian state a top lawyer to represent their men out there. So, yeah, this story obviously will have many more weeks and months to run.
We're dealing with a lot of very unreliable people who are all, quite likely to be mendacious in their storytelling. So, gosh only knows where we're going.
Okay, well, let's hope we didn't libel anyone in that. Maybe let's hope we did. We get extra notoriety for Bogotá Nights. Anyway, Ollie, another bugbear of yours in some ways, or at least kind of does fascinate you, is how quickly the news cycle moves along here, and stories that everyone's talking about and shocked about one day, the next day it's like it never happened. This day last week we did talk about Epa Colombia, and she was sentenced to, what was it, over 5 years in prison, and already then, when we were talking about it last week, only a few hours after the event or whatever, there were change.org petitions being sent around and stuff like that. So a little bit of good news for her, it seems, or at least she's not going straight to prison. That's right.
Right, she's going off to the Supreme Court, which seems entirely reasonable. I mean, the Tribunal of Bogotá really, it seems bizarre that they were handing out such a huge fine and long sentence. So, yeah, she'll get.
She's a terrorist, Ali. A terrorist, remember?
Well, according to two of the judges, one withheld, didn't go along with that assessment. So she'll get her day in front of a proper judge, and you'd like to think there'll be a little bit more leniency, hopefully, there.
Yeah, the fine, by the way, it's not insignificant. Is it 472 million pesos?
Yeah, it's enough to buy a decent house, yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. I wouldn't mind having a fraction of that right now. Maybe EPA, come on, sponsor Bogotá Nights. You can get all the millions of women who watch this show to use your keratin products. And by the way, if you're tuning in,
wait, stop. This is all natural. We don't need keratin.
Yeah, this is all very much natural indeed. The bit that's left. By the way, those who are wondering what we're talking about, you can always go back and find all the catalogue of videos that we've had, either via Bogotá Post on Facebook, just go into the video section, or on my own Wrong Way Corrigan blog Facebook page, or indeed if you search Bogotá Nights Live, you'll find I put all the videos up on YouTube as well. So a number of ways that you can watch back previous episodes, and you can find out all about EPA Colombia. And indeed, last week we were talking about crime in general in Colombia, the perception that it's on the increase. But is it? We maybe debunked that myth in some ways. Ollie, sport, before we get to our little 1990s Bogotá series. Bad news on the La Selección de Colombia front. They're going to be out without one of the big guns for these massive games, really. 3 games in a week in the qualifiers for the World Cup. So, I mean, this could be the make or break if they go to Qatar or not, if you start dropping points. So, Duvan Zapata is out.
Yeah. So that's a big goal threat out. On the other hand, Watford's Cucho Hernandez, Cucho Hernandez, who was bought sort of 4 years ago by Watford, finally made his Premier League debut and instantly scored a winning goal. So, there's swings and roundabouts, I think, here.
Well, yeah, swings and roundabouts. Well, we can't not mention the Selección de Colombia, or should I mention the Selección de Colombia and not mention James Rodriguez. He hasn't played for Everton. Unlikely that he's going to play this weekend. I think it's Brighton. I think, and excuse me, guys, for not doing my full research, but I was in a rush getting here, but I saw a tweet or a headline that apparently he tweeted something saying, "I'm not even sure who Everton are playing this weekend." So that says a lot about his state of mind. We talked before, he wouldn't exactly be the right fit for Rafa Benitez, the new manager at Everton, of course. But the transfer window closes in a couple of weeks, and I don't think there's a great amount of interest for him. And also, we're talking about, like, will he even? He was dropped for the Copa America. I don't think he'll be called up again either for these 3 games.
You'd have to say it's going to be very unlikely. I mean, look, consequences are coming back for him. I think, he's just not got a great attitude, has he? Let's be honest.
Yeah, like, what age was he in 2014? Like 21, 22?
22, yeah.
So, okay, not young as superstar footballers go, but maybe that goal really was the peak of his career, and he'll live off that goal against Uruguay, that sensational strike, of course, as it was, for the rest of his life, basically. And look, he's not going to die a poor man unless he makes some horrible investments in the future. I mean, his brand is already, I'm not guess, doing an awful lot better than what he does on the field right now, which is nothing. But yeah, there you go. Well, we watched this space, and of course, guys, we'll be getting our teeth more into the La Selección de Colombia and those games, because it'll be in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, this day, 2 weeks. They'll be in action against Bolivia. They probably would have already have played that game, so we'll know how they got on in the altitude of La Paz. Jacob Toms, thanks for getting in touch. Nice to hear from you. Just wondering about my extras gigs. I need about 5 of them a week minimum, if it's just a standard extra. If I get a mini role, which I did get, but I don't want to go into all the details, Jacob, but at the moment that seems to be on hold, so I don't even know am I going to get paid at all, having lost a day last week. Anyway, let's move on to our big meaty topic for tonight, which seemed to generate a little bit of confusion on social media when I shared this earlier. So, Ali, you can explain perhaps a little bit better than my promotional text did. We were talking, so we kind of feel the vibe, the life of Bogotá and Colombia in general, perhaps the urban centres anyway, reminds us of our lives in the 90s where we came from, in certain sectors, in certain areas and walks of life. So explain, the floor is yours.
Yeah, basically, I mean, there's been a lot of changes, obviously, through the years, certainly in the United Kingdom, which is my point of reference. And not all of those changes have been positive. And I really like the fact that a lot of things that I loved in my childhood that have disappeared in England now are still very much alive and well in Bogotá and a fact of daily life in many ways. So that it makes me really happy. You know, I get to live in my own sort of, this is when life used to be good sort of thing. And I mean, look, we're not talking about, we're not talking about some of the bad things of the 90s. And we're certainly not talking about Colombia of the 90s, which was a very different kettle of fish. But it's more about that kind of vibe. So I give you one sort of example, Brendan. It would be something like, I use cash all the time, proper cash. I mean, coins even. Now, when I go back to the UK, the last time I was back was 3.5 years ago, and nobody used cash for anything. People looked at me strangely when I held out notes in a pub.
Well, I just want to get onto the cash thing here for a second here. It's your moment to dispel those rumours and kick them to touch. You weren't caught lighting a Cuban cigar with a rolled up.
I was not.
No. Okay, that wasn't Ollie. That was somebody else who resembled Ollie. Of course, he doesn't do that. Is it an offence here to light notes, as we would say, or bills, as they'd say in the US? Because it is in the US, isn't it?
The US, I have no idea. In the UK, it is because it has the Queen's image. It's considered treason. It almost certainly isn't really considered treason. That every school kid learns that it is. So you can't damage coins and currency and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, going back to the point, I mean, I find it really sad, and I know that Bogotá is going to change, and I know that the writing is on the wall, but it's going to hold out for a lot longer, I think. It's going to take a lot longer for empanadas to be easily buyable, with contactless payments. It's going to take a while before certainly lots of Colombia, can you imagine places like Me Too going fully contactless, or places that have irregular power supplies? It could be really problematic. So yeah, I really enjoy that. I enjoy properly using cash, for example.
And it doesn't. When we're talking about the healthy economy and the good headline GDP figures here, but it might also help in terms of you know what you're spending. Now, of course, if you're on a credit card, it's even worse. Obviously, a debit card, you'll max out or whatever, or you just spend what's in your account. But when you physically hand over cash, you know, there is that
Absolutely
mental thing, psychological thing that, yeah, like, okay, I've spent this amount of money on whatever product. So it would help, I would imagine, to keep people kind of keep their expenditure in line.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I really also love about it is physically having to give the money to somebody. It's not only watching it being paid out, but it's actually putting it in the hand of another person is something that really, gives me, gives me a much greater sense of what I'm actually doing. And actually, while we're on it, supermarkets, again, I'm not a massive fan of, swipe it yourself tills. I don't like it when businesses, push us to do their work for them.
Well, yeah, fair enough. The self-service checkouts, and a lot of the time they don't work anyway. Jacob Toms is certainly in agreement on the cash here, so we are kind of all in agreement on that. If there are people against it, though, are there others who prefer to use their card, think it's handier? But as you said, Ollie, there are just so many areas. I can never imagine, or I guess I can never imagine, as you said, the time, I guess, will come. But, like, in the barrio here where I socialise, as I mention every week, Santandercito, but, like, going into the tienda with a card, I mean, right now, they'd be like, what? What on earth are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous. No way. And then, yeah, as you say, the empanada on the street, all that kind of street food would seem practically impossible to use a card. The self-service checkout reminds me then as well, and actually just yesterday, I think it was, I had an on this day, I've been going through stories I've written in the past, and then kind of saying this is what I wrote, or this is what I published a few years ago, and it was 2014, the rollout of the SITIP buses. But we're still here today. There's still a few of the old collectivos, hanging on. And that can give employment to two people, because you've got the bus driver, and then sometimes you'll have a pal, which I'm sure maybe the pal's just going for the journey, or maybe sometimes even his whole family in the bus, in the seat alongside him, handing the money and doing all the cash transactions. So, that's kind of nice as well. But they're almost dying out, but would you be surprised if in 5 years we still have a few collectivos doing the runs?
No, and I'll also be quite surprised if we have a metro while we're there.
Oh, well, is it meant to be in 5 years anyway? Is it not like 10 years?
Well, we should at least be able to see bits of it by 5 years, you'd have thought. I'm not fully sure that'll be taking place either. But yeah, that's...
Well, you're losing your title that I gave you in a message earlier on another topic, but Ollie the Optimist, because I think it runs well, but you're losing that now. Anyway, what were you going to say? Sorry?
Another point that we sort of should mention that I think is a really great boon is that I really feel like I've got high streets here in Bogotá, and quite a few of them. If I was to think of 45 down there, or if I'm thinking of the 13 right here, or Septima, of course, just up the road, but actually pretty much every barrio you go to, there's kind of a proper high street with proper high street shops on it. And I like that. And that's something, again, that I really like about Bogotá, proper community shops, and often small and independent as well. Again, that wasn't, I'd have never thought about that when I was a child. But certainly by the time I was becoming a teenager, becoming a young man, chains were really starting to destroy everything. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, pretty much every high street in the UK, literally followed a pattern. It would be a Specsavers here, a McDonald's there, a Costa Coffee here, and just literally in exactly the same order, complete facsimiles, every single high street. No personality, no individuality, profits going off to some tax dodging brute somewhere. And yeah, that's not really true of Bogotá in 2021. And I like
Yeah, because even when they're building the conjuntos, and we've talked about this in previous shows as well, but it's that independent barrio. Like, for example, I live here in the far north, 187 with 17. I mean, I rarely need to go outside of like a 3 kilometer radius for everything I need around here. It's got it all really. So they're all like independent like, little towns in their own right. So even where you have a conjunto, for example, which kind of seen as damaging that little barrio style, but they do maintain the little kind of town part of it as well in most areas. Maybe around Cedritos, they're losing a bit of that. But like contrast that, and even this was developing in the 90s and probably well before in Ireland anyway, in fairness. So maybe this is outside of the whole 90s comparison. But the build-up of suburbia and just houses, okay, the odd park. But a real loss where you had to really go a distance to get a pub or that kind of little store or whatever. And of course, they're not, as you say, they're all parts of chains now. Your Costa Coffees, and they're taking over. Whereas here, you've got your neighborhood family-ran panaderia, the tienda where you can wander in, and very competitively priced. Well, not even competitively priced, cheaper than the bigger. In many ways.
Cheaper than Exeter. Certainly cheaper than Exeter. Probably not as cheap as our Teuna. But yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. And actually the range of shops, again, much better, I think. That I can go to a flower shop if I want to get flowers, proper florists. Whereas in England, that would almost certainly nowadays, it would just be online. I in fact did recently go to the cobblers to get some shoes cobbled, fixed, repaired. And again, in England, either you have to seek that out, or it's kind of like, big la-di-da, fancy Dan, vintage restoration company sort of thing. Whereas here, cobbling it simply is a fact of life. People still go and get shoes cobbled back together.
Yeah, now again, 90s Ireland, like that was mid-90s really, the Celtic Tiger was beginning to roar. So, we started becoming more modernized after shaking off the depressing 80s where practically anybody that had a bit of get up and go did exactly that and got out of the country. But so Ireland may be kind of in some sort of a grey area if we're going back, kind of using that 90s comparison. But just in general, like I fully agree that the fast fashion, and maybe a Brendan of 15 years ago, would be more a fast fashion kind of consumer. But now I like the idea that, no, I'll get these jeans stitched up. I'll get the zip fixed on this jacket. It's not going to cost, because the places are here and they're available, and there's one a block away or whatever. These industries exist and they thrive. And yeah, it's kind of, I know people will say, oh God, look at the old men harping back to days that they never lived in their own countries, to be honest, because I think, it's a long time ago, I guess you could get shoes probably properly fixed, and available in your local, close by in the UK, maybe going back further than the 90s.
I think you could in the 1990s. But here's another thing. I mean, there's still like laundry services. I mean, there's no real laundry services in the UK these days. I mean, suits maybe in big cities, but yeah, dry cleaners for suits. Yeah, absolutely. But you certainly like a laundrette where you go in and use a washing machine. That doesn't exist. Whereas, well, except in EastEnders, of course.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, you mentioned as well earlier when we were in our planning for the show here, on a night out, and okay, people might say we talk a lot about alcohol as well and beer, but the affordability now of beer, especially compared to the UK, and I'd love to know what it's like in the United States. I think if you get away from the the big urban centers on the east and west coast of the US, middle flyover America, that you will get more value for money if you go to your local bar or whatever, or what else would they call it in the Midwest, I'm not sure. But based on a kind of using the minimum salary as a comparison, like here, you work about 20 minutes, and that could get you a small beer, like a 330 bottle beer in your local tienda. Whereas in the UK, what would you have to work?
In London, you're looking at about 40 minutes work at minimum salary to get a beer in London. But as you say, London is wildly imbalanced. But yeah, even in the rest of Britain, you'd say you're getting 30, 40 minutes before you're buying a pint of beer. And in my lifetime, the price of beer in Britain has kind of trebled, whereas in my decade in Colombia. Sorry, not in my lifetime. In the time I've been drinking beer, so in the last 20 years, in England, the price of a pint of beer has kind of about trebled. Whereas in my 10 years in Colombia, it's gone up about 150%. So, sorry, it's gone up 50%. So, you've gone from, let's say, when I was first here, it was around 2,000 for a beer. Now it's around 3,000 in a tienda.
Well, but it's even, to be honest, since the introduction of the litrazo, the poker, and Brendan doesn't have any standards, so I'll happily drink a litre of poker. It's 4,000 in where I socialise. Like, that's probably cheaper than when you go back. Okay, maybe in 2012 you could get a 330 bottle, because there was no big bottles back in 2012, for 1,500. Thereabouts. But that still means the litre of beer you're now getting today, even taking inflation, all that into account, like it well beats that value of 2000. Oh
yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this before. That standard beer pricing in Colombia doesn't follow any economic reality whatsoever.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, Jacob, thanks for sticking with us in the morning, I guess, that it is in Auckland, but he's saying, there's probably only one cobbler left in Auckland, and he probably hasn't got much business.
Which I was about to say, which is surprising, really, because you'd think that New Zealand is kind of in whatever year it is in Tolkien land.
All right. They're going to lose that now, are they not? Did I not hear Lord of the Rings is going to move? What was it, at Amazon or one of those things that I don't watch? Apple, Amazon, whoever's making a series on the Lord of the Rings, but they're going to move filming to Wales, I think. Anyway, Jacob.
Oh, great stuff. Well, I mean, that'll save money on CGI dragons. They can just use a real dragon.
Oh, of course, yeah, floating around there. One thing, mentioning New Zealand, though, and it maybe kind of ties in with Bogotá, especially for you from the UK, Ireland as well, maybe a little bit of a grey area, was in the 1990s. No, this is the whole point, because we're talking about it being like the 1990s. The idea of like pub closures. I remember being in Auckland on a Sunday with my cousins, Manchester cousins who lived there. And yeah, I think it was a Sunday or whatever day it was, but I was expecting, we'll be out for it. And I was like, oh no, the pub is closing now. But what? Hold on. It's ridiculously early. For a country that is quite, but I was going to say, for a country that's quite liberal prostitution laws, and then they were quite strict, I thought, on closing times. But you were saying Sundays in Bogotá and Colombia in general kind of give you that 90s vibe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing I really love about Bogotá is the fact, and I do complain about it on some Sundays because, it can be quite boring if you haven't got your ducks in a row. But Sunday really is still a special day in Colombia in a way that in England now it's just like another Saturday. There's kind of two Saturdays, except you've got work after one of these Saturdays and you don't have work after the other one. Whereas Sunday really does feel in Colombia like it's still a day when people put on their Sunday best, when families kind of meet up you know, for big meals and all that sort of thing. And of course, as you say, places close and things change, and you know, which I really do like that. I think that's a very positive thing.
Yeah, okay. By the way, just before the Auckland Tourism Board have a go at me, according to Jacob, there's still plenty of places you can go out on a Sunday in Auckland. I'm sure that's the case. I guess my elderly Manchester-born cousin was just thinking that I'd already drunk enough from my 5 months travelling around South America before I got to Auckland on my stop over there. By the way, speaking then of going out on Sunday nights, but of course, here too, it's like Bogota. It is the city that sleeps well. Like it not New York or anything like that. It's still, you know, midnight. Okay, there are a few areas where you'll get your late night parties and things like that. But people like to get home relatively early here. The vast majority. I don't know if that's a crossover with the 90s. Probably not. But health and safety, I mentioned that, and kind of personal responsibility. And like for me, since the turn of the century, the new millennium, like a lot of this kind of big brother government, and people say, oh, he's getting all kind of libertarian on us here, Brendan. But it's like this idea that like you the government's going to control everything you have to do, and blah, 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 health and safety. And I worked on building sites where, you had to wear a hard helmet when you, like, what? A plane is going to come and land on me or something? There was no risk of anything falling on me. And in the 1990s, I do recall, working, well, I wasn't working on building sites in the 1990s, I was too young, but being around building sites on the farm and stuff like that. And the health and safety measures were a little bit more relaxed, put it that way. Now I know there's pros and cons to this, but like here, if you are walking down a street in Bogota and you fall into, what do they call it, an access hole, a service hole or whatever, an uncovered service hole, well, tough luck, buddy. get on with it.
Yeah, I mean that... Yeah. And I must say, actually, on this Sunday night, I did actually cover... an access hole that was just missing on a dark street, and somebody could very easily have fallen down that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of people nicking access holes, but I would say, yeah, I mean, you talk about sort of being around building sites. Certainly, I spent quite a lot of the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, kind of dashing about scrap yards, literally climbing up big piles of cars and that sort of thing, which, yeah, you'd never be allowed to do in England nowadays. I doubt that my father would even have been allowed to take me into the scrapyard without some officious person running along with a brightly coloured high-vis jacket to go, no, we can't have children climbing around on cars. They might pull a car over. Children can be very strong. And yeah, certainly in Colombia, I absolutely believe that would probably be possible.
Yeah, like there's still a little bit of the whole world's not out to get me here. Like you just go about your business. Okay, I guess what's ruined it, especially from an Irish perspective anyway, is the cost of insurance and then compo culture, which obviously there's a relation between both of those. Whereas like here, that compo culture just doesn't exist at the moment. So
not in the same way, yeah.
Yeah.
And also not this kind of hysteria over certain things. So if I'm out walking the dogs, for example, very commonly a little child will say, oh, these dogs are very cute, what is their name, that sort of thing. And I'll say, oh, this one's Zoe, that one's Laika, they're very fine, but be careful, they might knock you over, they're very strong, blah, blah, blah. In England, I would be wary of letting my dogs interact with a child. And actually, I would avoid talking to, and certainly I would never touch a child in Britain because it just wouldn't be worth it. Even if a child was falling over. So I've seen kids fall over in the Parque Nacional here in Bogota, and I'll stick out a hand to catch them so they don't fall over and hit the floor. In England, I just wouldn't do it. A strange man touching a child, no, it's not worth it. There's so much hysteria and sort of fear over that I just wouldn't do it. But again, thinking back to the 90s, when, of course, I was on the other side of that, unknown adults would regularly, we'd be sort of mucking around playing football in the park. And if we were being a bit too boisterous, absolutely a random woman from the neighborhood would walk out of her garden and just say, "Oi, what are you doing? Be quiet." That sort of thing. And I can imagine that happening in Bogotá very easily today. In England, no chance. Just no chance.
And it's semi-related to that. And obviously, when I talk about Ireland, the whole of Ireland is not even 7 million. So, it doesn't compare at all in terms of population. But I walked to school. It was about just over a mile. And my parents, to primary school, my parents were happy, indeed, not more than happy. They would walk to school, unless it was absolutely belting down rain or something. But the default option was that you walked, or when I was lucky enough then to have a bike, take the bike to school. Nowadays, when technically the roads are in better condition, and I would say the statistics would say the roads are safer for children.
Certainly cars are a lot safer, yeah.
Well, cars, okay. Well, I know we're going to enter into the rabbit hole here on that. No, but what I'm saying is that there's now a footpath where, especially in the early few years when I walked to school, it didn't exist for part of the way. But my sisters do not allow their children to walk all the way. They drive them to where the footpath begins. And I'm like, well, I used to have to walk all of that area. I don't know, this idea that, everything, as I say, that the world is out to get them. I kind of make this joke, and I'll get into trouble probably with some people, is that, everyone's concerned about global warming, yet I've noticed in the West and the higher income nations, there's a lot more snowflakes about. So it seems to be... Anyway, and here, thankfully, as far as I'm concerned, there are fewer snowflakes.
Can you remember, I'm sure this, you grew up sort of on a farm, from what you've told me. I'm sure you must have ridden around in the back of a car or in a boot. Oh,
yes, of course. Sorry, I was a bit distracted because I was reading Jacob's goodbye text. So thanks, Jacob. But my dad always had a pickup truck. And, we just traveling around, and we'd jump in the back of the pickup truck on the rare days when it was sunny and you weren't going to get wet in Ireland. And that was fine. Nowadays, you'd probably report it to, if not the police, but to the social welfare officers or whatever for kind of abuse of your children for allowing...
Whereas in many parts of Colombia, that's standard transport method. But we are, I believe, at time, Brendan.
Yeah, by the way, Ollie, do you know what's coming next week?
It's our anniversary.
It is. We better crack open the champagne. We're going to have a special happy anniversary, first birthday of Bogotá Nights. But guys, we've got to leave it there. Our producer's writing to us. Thanks for watching. This was the Ollie, Brendan and Jacob Tom show tonight. Good night.
Ciao.